On the drive home from a large Easter family gathering in Charleston, when I was 16, I was involved in a severe accident on I-26. Doctors said I needed emergency surgery within the hour, or I wouldn't survive. My mom and my little sister were spending the afternoon at an upscale spa. When the hospital put her on speakerphone, my mom's exact response was, "If she doesn't pull through, just let me know later. We're in the middle of a treatment, and I'm not signing anything right now." My name is Serenity Carver, and I'm 21 today. 18 days later, when I finally woke up, the chart at the end of my bed had been updated. My mother was no longer listed as my legal guardian. A different name had been added. And that guardian was, well, if you've ever watched the people who were supposed to care for you turn their backs the moment you needed them, drop the words. I've seen similar stories in the comments, so I know I'm not alone. Subscribe if you want to know who stepped up when my mother didn't, because the situation only gets more complicated from here. Let me go back to where everything began. I grew up in a big white house on James Island, just outside Charleston. My dad died of leukemia when I was 6. One week, he was teaching me how to ride a bike in the driveway. The next, he was gone. After the funeral, the only person who continued showing up every weekend was my mom's father, Clarence Brooks. Everyone in the county knew him as the former police chief who never really retired. He simply exchanged the badge for a fishing rod and porch swing. He'd pull up in his old Ford pickup, bring shrimp and grits from his favorite Shem Creek spot, and let me sit in the front seat while he told stories about chasing bootleggers along back roads. To me, he wasn't Grandpa Clarence. He was just Grandpa, the one adult who never failed to show up. My mom, Harmony Carver, grieved for about a year, then met Colin Reed at a charity gala downtown. Colin owned much of the new construction on Kiowa Island and drove a black Range Rover that always smelled like new leather. 2 years later, they had a beachfront wedding I barely remember. 9 months after that, Haven was born, blonde, loud, and instantly the focus of everything. Suddenly, the house had a nursery, a nanny, and an entirely new set of expectations. My bedroom was moved to the back corner above the garage so Haven could have the larger room with the balcony. My soccer trophies were packed away. My mom started introducing me as my older daughter instead of using my name, like I was an extra in someone else's family picture. By 14, I felt invisible. Colin paid for everything, but he rarely looked at me unless I was in the way. Haven received new clothes each season. I got old uniforms from the private school I didn't attend. The only place I felt welcome was Grandpa's small brick house in West Ashley, 20 minutes across the Ravenel Bridge. He kept my bike in the garage, stocked the freezer with popsicles, and never asked why I spent every weekend there. Easter weekend when I was 16 was supposed to be different. Grandpa hosted his annual cookout. 3 long tables under the live oaks, low country boil, deviled eggs, sweet tea in mason jars. Cousins I hadn't seen in years flew in. Kids ran around, music played, and the smell of charcoal filled the yard. I wore the pale yellow sundress Grandpa had bought me because he said it matched my eyes. For a few hours, it felt like the old days, like I still belonged. Then I overheard my mom on the phone near the dessert table. She was laughing, telling someone she and Haven had booked a mother-daughter spa day the next morning. Facials, massages, everything. After that, she, Colin, and Haven were flying to the Bahamas for spring break. My name came up. I stood there holding a plate of banana pudding, feeling it cool in my hands. I told Grandpa I had a headache and needed to head home. He tried to talk me out of it, but I just wanted to leave. He handed me the keys to the 1998 Jeep Wrangler he helped me buy with my summer lifeguard pay. "Drive careful, baby girl. Text me when you get there." I said I would. It was getting dark as I drove westbound on I-26. A storm rolled in fast, the way it does in the low country. The sky turned green, rain came down in sheets, and the wipers ran full speed but couldn't keep up. Traffic slowed. I turned up the radio to stay alert. It was one of Grandpa's favorite old country songs. Headlights blurred into streaks. I didn't see the tractor trailer until it was too late. The driver hydroplaned, jackknifed across 3 lanes, and hit the driver's side of my Jeep going at least 60. Metal folded, glass broke, and the vehicle flipped twice before sliding to a stop side down against the median. I remember the seatbelt digging into my shoulder, The taste of blood, the quiet after the impact, and then nothing. Sirens approached from a distance. The emergency room at MUSC was chaotic. Doctors called out instructions, monitors buzzed, and someone kept requesting more O negative. They rushed me into Trauma Bay 1. My clothes were cut off, needles inserted into both arms, and tubes placed down my throat. A surgeon in blood-spattered scrubs leaned over and explained that my pelvis was shattered, my spleen ruptured, I was bleeding inside my skull, and I had less than an hour before things became irreversible. They needed parental consent to take me to the OR immediately. A nurse with kind eyes held my phone, found my mom's contact, and hit FaceTime. The call connected on the third ring. I heard spa music and the steady, steady hum of massage chairs. My mother appeared on screen with a sheet mask on and cucumber slices over her eyes. Haven was on the table beside her, earbuds in, scrolling TikTok. "Mrs. Reed, this is Nurse Alvarez from USC Trauma," the nurse said, angling the phone so Harmony could see my face, blood, and the ventilator tube. "Your daughter has been in a severe accident. She has life-threatening injuries and needs immediate surgery. We need verbal consent now, or she may not survive the next hour." Harmony removed one cucumber slice and squinted at the screen. Haven pulled out an earbud and looked over. A doctor stepped in and said, "Ma'am, we are dealing with multiple fractures, internal bleeding, and potential brain swelling. We have to operate now." Harmony sighed, as if the request were an inconvenience. "If she doesn't make it, call me when it's over," she said plainly. "We're in the middle of a treatment, and I'm not driving downtown to sign papers." Haven gave a short laugh, covered her mouth, then took a screenshot of my face on the gurney. I saw her texting quickly. Later, I learned the caption she sent to her group chat was "finally some peace." The nurse's hand shook while holding the phone. A doctor behind her muttered, "Jesus Christ." Someone whispered, "Record that." The nurse tried again. "Ma'am, we legally need your consent for a minor." Harmony cut her off. "Call my father, Clarence Brooks. He'll take care of it. We paid for a full day here." She ended the call. The trauma team stared at the blank screen. One resident looked ready to throw the phone. They went to the next emergency contact, Grandpa. His old Ford pickup was already on the road by the time the hospital reached him. He'd been on his porch cleaning shrimp for dinner. The second he heard Serenity and Critical, he dropped everything and drove across the Ashley River Bridge, still wearing rubber boots and an apron marked with fish. Rain hit the windshield hard. Lightning lit the sky. He made the 25-minute trip in 16. He ran through the ER doors soaked, the badge he'd worn for 30 years still clipped to his belt. The charge nurse recognized the retired chief instantly and waved him back. He signed every form placed in front of him without reading, his hands shaking so much the pen scraped the paper. They let him into the trauma bay long enough to see me, tubes everywhere, face swollen. He leaned close and whispered the same words he used when I had nightmares as a kid. "I've got you, baby girl. Grandpa's here." Then they took me to surgery. He pulled up a metal chair beside the glass wall outside the operating room and sat. He didn't move for 9 hours. Not when nurses offered coffee. Not when the waiting room emptied. Not when the storm knocked the power out for 12 minutes and the generators started. When they finally brought me to ICU before sunrise, he followed the bed, still holding the same cold hand that had gone limp hours earlier. The next 18 days were the longest of his life. ICU smelled like antiseptic. Machines beeped steadily. Grandpa claimed the vinyl recliner beside me and did not leave. Nurses tried to send him home the first night. He showed them the old badge in his wallet and said, "I'm not going anywhere." No one questioned him again. He slept in short bursts, boots still on. When awake, he talked quietly, so the machines wouldn't drown him out. He told me about the night I was born, when he held me first because my mom was exhausted. He retold the story of the summer I was 8 and we caught a 5-foot shark off Folly Beach Pier, how I screamed until he let me reel it in myself. He read from his worn copy of To Kill a Mockingbird he kept in the truck, doing all the voices. Some evenings, he hummed the hymn his mother used to sing, the same one that put me to sleep on his couch years ago. Doctors came in and out. One morning, the neurologist said the swelling in my brain had gone down. Another day, the orthopedic surgeon explained my pelvis might never heal straight. Grandpa listened, nodded, asked pointed questions, then went back to holding my hand. On day 16, the numbers finally improved. My blood pressure stabilized. The ventilator settings lowered. A nurse noticed Grandpa smiling for the first time in weeks. That afternoon, while he whispered that the redfish were running and we'd go fishing as soon as I woke up, a tall man in a navy suit appeared at the glass door. Mr. Donovan had worked cases with Grandpa decades earlier. They still played poker monthly. Grandpa looked at him, saw the folder in his hand, and gave a slow nod. Donovan left the hospital, got into his silver Lexus, and drove to James Island. He knew the address well. Harmony and Haven were in the foyer surrounded by luggage. Two matching pink suitcases sat near the door with tags for a 7-night Royal Caribbean cruise, leaving the next morning. Colin was upstairs on a call. Haven was filming herself twirling in a new sundress for Instagram. Harmony checked passports. The doorbell rang. Donovan introduced himself, handed her a thick envelope, and waited while she opened it. Inside were 2 sets of documents: an emergency petition to remove parental rights for medical neglect of a minor, and a civil suit from the hospital for extensive life-saving care plus damages, both naming Harmony Reed and, because Haven was 14 and had been part of the refusal, naming her as well. Harmony's face went pale. Haven stopped recording. "You have 72 hours to respond," Donovan said. "After that, the judge has approved an emergency hearing." Harmony started yelling about lawyers, mistakes, and her parenting being questioned. Haven cried dramatically, insisting she didn't mean her texts. Donovan simply walked back to his car. Back at the hospital, Grandpa never mentioned the visit. He kept holding my hand and humming the same hymn, waiting for me to wake. 2 days later, I opened my eyes. Everything hurt. My mouth tasted metallic. Machines beeped softly. The first face I saw was Grandpa's, unshaven, eyes red, smiling so wide it looked painful. "Hey, baby girl," he whispered. "Welcome back." I tried to speak, but only a rasp came out. He pressed the call button, then lifted the whiteboard at the end of the bed. In large black letters, "Legal Guardian, Clarence Brooks." I stared until it blurred. Tears slid into my ears. He wiped them away with a thumb that still smelled faintly of shrimp and salt. In the hours that followed, between vitals checks and lights in my eyes, he told me everything. The FaceTime call. My mother's words. Haven's screenshot. The papers delivered while I was unconscious. He didn't soften any part of it. I cried again, not from pain, but from a relief that felt overwhelming. 3 weeks later, I was discharged. Not to James Island, but to Grandpa's small gray raised house on Folly Beach, 15 minutes south. The salt air hit me as he carried me inside. My new room had once been his tackle room. He painted the walls pale blue and hung the wind chimes we made when I was 9. From the window, I could see the ocean. Physical therapy started Monday. I learned to sit up, then stand, then move behind a walker while Grandpa spotted me like I was a toddler again. He made shrimp and grits every night because it was soft enough for my wired jaw. We watched the sunset from the porch swing, his arm around my shoulders, neither of us needing to talk. One afternoon, my phone rang on the counter. My mom's name appeared. I stared at it for 10 rings. Grandpa watched quietly. I declined the call, set the phone down, and returned to the porch. That was the only time she tried. Across town, Colin filed for divorce the same week. His company had just secured a major contract with the port. He didn't want headlines about child neglect linked to him. He moved out of the James Island house once the papers were signed, taking only clothes and golf clubs. Haven reacted online for 3 days, then went quiet when colleges withdrew scholarship offers. Grandpa never brought it up unless I asked. When I did, he answered simply, "They made their choice, Wren. Now we make ours." Some nights the pain woke me up screaming. He would come in wearing his old police academy sweatshirt, sit on the edge of the bed, and hold my hand until the medication settled. Some nights I woke to him praying in the living room, voice rough, asking God for enough time to see me well again. By the time the stitches came out and the casts became braces, I could walk the full length of the pier without stopping. Grandpa bought 2 fishing rods and a bucket of shrimp, and we sat where the water turned deep green, not catching much, but not minding. The sun finally cleared the last traces of the hospital from my skin. One evening, staring at the horizon with the wind pushing my hair across my face, I realized I wasn't waiting for anything anymore. No apology, explanation, or second chance I never planned to give. The ocean kept moving as always. Months later, the preliminary hearing arrived. The Broad Street courthouse smelled of old wood and floor wax. I walked in on crutches, Grandpa on one side and Donovan on the other. My mother sat at the defendant's table in a navy suit 2 sizes too big, eyes puffy and bare of makeup. Havin sat beside her in a private school blazer, staring at the floor. The judge, a woman with steel gray hair and little patience, adjusted her glasses and instructed the bailiff to play the recording. The FaceTime call appeared on the screen. My injured body on the gurney, spa music in the background, my mother's voice clear and detached. "If she doesn't make it, just call me when it's over." Havin's laugh. The screenshot of my bloodied face with her caption. The courtroom fell silent. A juror even gasped. Donovan placed the phone records on the bench next. Haven had shared the photo to 7 group chats within 4 minutes. One message read, "One less person stealing my spring break." The judge's pen stopped. She studied my mother for a long moment. "Mrs. Reed," she said, voice firm, "in 23 years on this bench, I have never heard a parent speak about their child like this while that child fought for her life. Temporary full custody is transferred to Clarence Brooks immediately. We'll reconvene for the permanent hearing." She struck the gavel hard enough for the sound to echo across the room. 3 days later, Harmony lost her job at the South Carolina State Credit Union. Anyone handling federal funds must pass background checks, and medical neglect of a minor is an automatic disqualifier. Security escorted her out with a cardboard box. Haven's full-ride scholarship to the College of Charleston was revoked that same week for conduct incompatible with the institution's standards. Her private school, once quick to praise her, began whispering behind her back. Within a month, the James Island house entered foreclosure. Colin's name was already off the deed. He had signed everything over to protect his assets. Mother and daughter moved into a small 2-bedroom apartment off Savannah Highway with peeling paint and a broken elevator. Havin lost her car. Harmony worked nights stocking shelves at a grocery store to cover rent. Meanwhile, I started consistent therapy. Twice a week, a van took me to outpatient rehab at MMSC, where I relearned how to climb stairs, balance on a Bozu ball, and trust my own legs. Grandpa drove me every time, waiting in the lobby with the same 3 fishing magazines until I came out tired and shaking. On Thursdays, I met with a trauma counselor named Dr. Rivera in a small lavender-scented office, where we talked about nightmares, anger, and the moment I realized I no longer wanted to hear my mother's voice. Grandpa waited outside with the truck windows down, the country station low, never complaining about the heat. Some afternoons, when the pain in my hips sharpened, I sat on the back deck tossing bread to the gulls. Grandpa would join me with 2 sweet teas as we watched the tide recede. He never tried to fix my anger. He let me feel it. By late summer, I moved from crutches to a cane and then to walking on my own. I still had a slight limp, but the doctor said it would mostly fade by my 18th birthday. One evening, I walked to the end of Folly Pier and back without pausing. Grandpa met me halfway with a blanket and flashlight, even though the sun was still up. We sat on the sand with our shoes off, letting the waves reach our toes. I leaned on his shoulder and thanked him for staying. He kissed the top of my head and said he wouldn't have been anywhere else. 7 months after the crash, the final trial took place. I walked in without crutches, cane, or limp. The scar on my forehead was still pink, but I stood straight. Grandpa sat behind me in his Sunday suit, the one he wore to my father's funeral. Harmony looked smaller than before, hair pulled back and holding a tissue she didn't use. Havin stared forward, arms crossed tightly. Donovan called me first. I took the oath, sat, and looked directly at the judge. He asked how it felt knowing my mother refused to come while I was dying. I took a breath. The room waited. I said it felt like the last part of me that believed I mattered had faded on that table. My voice stayed steady. I learned I was expendable, and the person who showed me that was the same woman who once read me bedtime stories. I explained waking up to Grandpa's name on the Guardian line, the missed call I never returned, and the nights I fell asleep listening to the ocean instead of wondering why I wasn't enough. Harmony's lawyer argued she was stressed and overwhelmed, pointing to her job loss, foreclosure, and divorce. I never looked at her. When he finished, the judge asked if I had anything to add. I said I didn't want her money or apologies. I wanted it over. I already had a family. The judge returned 20 minutes later. Parental rights for Harmony Reed were permanently terminated, and a civil judgment of $480,000 was awarded to the plaintiff and the hospital. The James Island property would be sold at auction to satisfy the lien. Clarence Brooks was granted full legal adoption. Case closed. The gavel sounded like a starting signal. Reporters called out questions in the hallway, but I ignored them and walked into the October sunlight with Grandpa. 3 weeks later, the bank padlocked the White House. A moving truck arrived for what Harmony and Haven kept. They loaded boxes into an old sedan and drove north on I-26 toward somewhere cheaper and anonymous. I never asked where. That same month, the adoption papers arrived. I signed Serenity Brooks for the first time and cried harder than when I woke from the coma. Grandpa framed the certificate next to my father's service photo. I started my senior year at an alternative school near Folly Beach. Small classes, supportive teachers, and no one who knew my story, unless I chose to share it. I made the honor roll every quarter and was accepted early to the College of Charleston, close enough to commute if I wanted. Graduation day was warm and windy. I wore a pale blue cap and gown, the same color Grandpa painted my room. When my name was called, the entire class stood and cheered, knowing who had supported me. Grandpa waited at the bottom of the steps in his dress uniform, medals polished. I hugged him, and he lifted me like I weighed nothing. 5 years have passed since that Easter Sunday. I'm 21 now, with a psychology degree on the wall, working as a family trauma counselor at a nonprofit in Mount Pleasant. Every day I meet teenagers who think no one will ever choose them, and I can tell them otherwise because someone chose me when the people who were supposed to love me left without hesitation. Grandpa turned 77 last month. He still mows the yard, catches more fish than any charter captain, and makes the best shrimp and grits around. The stilt house is the same. Wind chimes, porch swing, and the old coffee pot always half full. My room remains pale blue, and his tackle room is still a bedroom because neither of us changed it back. We eat dinner on the deck, watching dolphins chase mullet. He calls me baby girl once a day, usually when handing me a sweet tea. I still call him Grandpa. Nothing else fits. Harmony and Haven left South Carolina 3 years ago. Last I heard, they were in Georgia renting a trailer under different last names. I never looked for them, and they never looked for me. The silence feels final and peaceful. People ask if I'm angry. I'm not. Anger takes energy I now spend on living. Some ask if I forgive. Forgiveness isn't mine to offer. It's theirs to earn, and they never tried. I'm simply finished. What remains is gratitude, deep enough to surprise me. Gratitude for the man who slept in a vinyl chair for 18 nights. For the retired chief who never missed a therapy appointment. For the grandfather who made his house a home. Family isn't defined by blood. Family is the person who stays when your world breaks, who signs the papers, holds your hand, and never treats you like a burden. If you're watching this and feel alone, look again. The person you need may be a grandparent, a friend, a teacher, or a neighbor who refuses to leave. When you find them, hold on. Real family is chosen every day, especially when choosing you costs them something. That's the truth I know, and that's my story.